A good Erev Shabbos. Let's be honest now. When you imagine what Pharaoh looks like in your mind's eye, what's the visual that comes to your mind? Is it a flat, two-dimensional, side-view figure standing next to the pyramids and the Sphinx? Or maybe it's a color illustration of Pharaoh refusing to let the Jews go that you recall from your childhood Haggadah. Do you see King Tut's golden mask, that icon of Egyptian funeral arts? Or really, isn't it true that many of us, most of us, just have this image of Yul Brynner in his smooth dome and his gold wristlets giving the death stare to Charlton Heston, "So let it be written, so let it be done." Pharaoh was a historical figure, no question about it. Maybe all the kings of Egypt were known as Pharaoh. The commentaries are a little vague on whether the new king that arose over Egypt and somehow knew not Joseph and enslaved the Hebrew nation was in fact a new king, maybe even from a new dynasty, or just the same old Pharaoh, willingly or unwittingly, conveniently forgetting history. To get the full sense of what Pharaoh means, or can mean for us, 3,000 years after the Exodus, we also have to take a peek somewhere else besides the encyclopedia, the history books, the internet. We should look in the mirror. Because Pharaoh is saying, in the words of one of the children's songs, "No, no, no, I will not let them go." Pharaoh is confining and constraining, limiting the Jews, keeping us from freedom and from fulfilling our destiny, which is to become a free nation and serve God with the instructions we're to receive at Mount Sinai. Mitzrayim, the word for Egypt, is Meitzarim, the same letters in Hebrew for Egypt and limitations. And this week's Torah portion, Bo el Paro, come to Pharaoh, not Lech el Paro, go to Pharaoh, which would be much more logical and sensible. If the real Pharaoh that limits us today and holds us back from being all that we truly can be were someone else, not the little Pharaoh inside of us that's saying, "No, no, no, I will not let you go." Some of us had a stronger Jewish education maybe than others. Some of us had parents who encouraged Jewish life in the home and the shul and the street, some less so. But at a certain point, we have to own our lives and take responsibility. Rabbi Akiva, it is said, did not start learning Torah until he was 40 years old. And look what he became, a leader of the Jewish people, whose names and teachings we're still quoting to this very day. In fact, I just did. You'll say, "Oh, if I were 40 again." Even I can say, "Oh, if I were 40 again." So what if we're not? We're alive today, and we can free ourselves from the limitations, the meitzarim, of low expectations and complacency, and learn more, learn how to do more, learn how to connect more with our Jewish selves and our Jewish souls. It's still Pharaoh keeping us imprisoned in Egypt, but this Pharaoh is in here. And we have to approach him and tell him, "Let my people go." It's time to set ourselves free. So how do we do that? How do we believe in ourselves enough to make positive change, to forgive, to change our attitudes, to acknowledge that bitterness over what may have happened a long time ago can't hold a candle to resolve now to change the present and the future? Maybe a key to that is in our parsha this week, Bo el Paro, come to Pharaoh. As the drama of the Exodus reaches its high point, and Pharaoh, the one in the story, Yul Brynner, finally relents after the 10th plague and resolves to let the Israelites free, the narrative stops right there and completely changes gears. Okay, pretty completely changes gears. It says at the beginning of chapter 12 of Exodus, right in the middle of the 4th Aliyah this Shabbat, you'll hear it read beautifully, HaChodesh hazeh lachem rosh chadashim, rishon hu lachem l'chodshei hashana. This month shall be for you the head of months, the first of the months of the year. The Torah then goes on to explain the commemoration of Exodus for future generations, the mitzvah of the Paschal offering, the Korban Pesach, telling the story to our children at the Seder, remembering the Exodus all the days of our lives, and all this according to a Jewish calendar. It should be that this month, Nisan, where Pesach occurs, should be in the springtime. Okay, at least in the northern hemisphere. And even in Toronto, that means that much of the snow is already melted, if not all of it. that we have a mitzvah to set up the Jewish calendar and celebrate the Jewish holidays according to that calendar. The months are established by the Torah. It tells us on the first day of the 7th month, we should sound the shofar, that's Rosh Hashanah. In the 15th of the first month, that's Nisan, in the springtime, we should eat matzah and tell the story of coming out of Egypt. The Torah only calls the months by numbers, the 1st, the 2nd, the 7th. In our exile in Babylon, we used Babylonian names to designate the months. And even after we left Babylon, most of us left, even a few honored members of our shul were or are from Babylon, from Iraq. Today only a handful of Jews remain there. But even after we left, we kept the Babylonian names of the months rather than changing them to remind us that as God took us out of Egypt and God took us out of Babylon, God will deliver us from all our exiles over time. So this calendar, which by rights should be organized by the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem, according to the reappearance of the new moon every 29 days or so, is in our times calculated for us, thanks to Hillel II in the early 300s, so that we'd always know how it worked, whether or not the Jewish Supreme Court was in session. This calendar is centered around the moon because the moon waxes and wanes. It renews. It fades and reappears. God renews it. Mechadesh, related to the word chidush, innovation, related to the word chadash, new, and chodesh, the month. They're all related. There's a prayer in your siddur. You can have a look at page 613 there for the beracha of Kiddush Levana, a prayer that we say after Rosh Chodesh, after the beginning of the new month, to acknowledge God who renews the month. Baruch Atah Hashem, we say Mechadesh Chadashim, signifying in a larger sense that God renews renewals, is another way to understand that God grants us also a power of renewal if we choose to tap into it. Midrash Tanchuma, Rav Hirsch, and others want us to appreciate fully this idea of renewal and how it can motivate and inspire us. We said this first mitzvah of the Torah in setting the calendar, determining time in a Jewish frame of reference is important. And we see new dimensions opening up when we take Rav Hirsch's understanding of Chidush and Chodesh here, combined with Lachem, for you, it should be for you. All these things should be for you, meaning the first thing you have to realize is that you can renew, you can change, you can grow. The past does not necessarily determine the future unless you allow it to. In Rav Hirsch's formulation, the renewal of the moon shall be a beginning of renewals for you. The contrast between the land of Egypt, the land of Mitzrayim, or limitations, the contrast between that and Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people, and the Torah that God wants to take us out of Egypt to reveal to us is most stark in this respect. Egypt embodies paganism, which views the world as deterministic. It's already all predetermined. It's run by a whole pantheon of gods and godlets whose ways are arbitrary and capricious and don't pay any attention to the wants and needs of humankind. People are just victims of fate, victims of bad luck, beneficiaries of good luck, for no appreciable reason. Human beings have no agency over their own lives. Nothing could be more different or more foreign to the Jewish way of thinking, which is that we can change. We believe that sin can be forgiven. We believe conflict isn't necessary. It can be resolved peaceably. We believe that relationships can be mended or repaired and life renewed. Our seasonal shifting of emphasis from freedom at Pesach time, Passover in the spring, to acceptance and connection and commitment at Shavuos, to grief around Tisha B'Av, to anticipation and responsibility around Elul, the month leading up to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and so on, keeps us always thinking about a different facet of our ability to appreciate and shape and change the world around us. As these annual progressions through different emotions and celebrations intersect with life cycle events of birth, marriage, celebration, and decline, and in what frame of mind we prepare ourselves to meet each is nothing less than a lifelong curriculum of growth and renewal. Our good friend and Shabbat morning regular, Freddie James Alav Hashalom, whose life came to its close this past week, would always notice and mention to me at the Kiddush whether or not the drasha contained a joke in it somewhere. He wasn't particular that it had to be at the beginning, and God bless him, he wasn't particular that it had to be a good joke, but he appreciated when there was something to smile at somewhere in there. So, in honor of Freddie, of blessed memory, here you are. A city street, a Buddhist monk is walking down the street, and he gets hungry. He walks up to a hot dog stand and says to the vendor, "Can you make me one with everything?" Pause for a minute to let that sink in. So the seller does, gives it to him, the monk pays him, and the monk stands there and waits and says, "Can I please have my change?" To which the hot dog stand guy says, "Ah, my friend, true change must come from within." There's a little truth in every joke, and this one for sure. True change must come from within. Changing our environment, changing our outfit or our soundtrack or our hair color is only going to get us so far. We have first to appreciate that we are endowed with the ability to change our inner lives, and then decide what it takes to accomplish that, and then pursue the goal while holding ourselves accountable and tracking our progress and working towards the goal. The little Pharaoh within that we spoke about at the outset is the only thing holding us back. This is the week we fulfill Bo El Paro. Come to Pharaoh and say, "Let my people go." Let our Yiddishkeit and our thirst for understanding and appreciation and our desire and drive for change and betterment of ourselves and our environment, let it blossom and flourish and express itself fully. In that, we earn for ourselves and achieve for ourselves real freedom. Freedom to pursue truth and righteousness, not just what Twitter and Facebook and the news tell us to follow, but what is real and enduring and holy. Pirkei Avos teaches us, Ein bein chorin elamisha osek b'talmud b'Talmud Torah. You can have no freer person than one who engages in the study of Torah. A good Shabbos.